David Lammy.
Madam Deputy Speaker, a few days ago I found myself rushing to switch off the television because my 5- and 7-year-old boys were in front of the news as we saw those images of men, women and children gassed and lying on floors, dead in front of our eyes. It's impossible to have watched events unfold in Syria over the past few years and think anything other than if not now, when. It's impossible to have watched the footage of the past week and not feel the instincts of liberal interventionism pulsating in our consciousness, telling us that we cannot be isolationists, we cannot turn a blind eye to mass murder, and we cannot wash our hands of the responsibility to act. And it's impossible not to think back to the difference British intervention did for the people of Kosovo, Sierra Leone and Libya, and wonder how it can be replicated for the people of Damascus, Homs and Aleppo. But tempering those instincts should be a resounding message seared into the memory of many in this House. Liberal interventionism can fail, and it can fail badly. It can fail if we have no vision for the outcome, no definition of success and no route map to the exit. It can fail if we allow our thirst for justice to trump the patience to secure the greatest possible legitimacy for our action. And it can fail if we forget that our first responsibility is not to make matters worse than they already are. Madam Deputy Speaker, Iraq is not a reason to absent ourselves from our responsibilities in Syria, but it is a reason to exercise caution, evoke clarity and define a conclusion. This government seeks out a blank cheque to use the British armed forces in Syria without convincingly and coherently answering the most crucial questions. What constitutes success in the context of a military intervention? If a negotiated settlement is the goal, then will military intervention make that more or less likely? Are we comfortable that our intervention is limited to punishing the use of chemical weapons rather than explicitly to protect the lives of Syrian people? Is it fair for the Prime Minister to imply, as he did today, that this is a humanitarian intervention when his only ambition is for Britain to be the dispassionate referee of a brutal civil war? If a short and limited military intervention does not lead to the cessation of the use of chemical weapons and instead leads to an escalation of hostilities or even worse, retaliation, do we escalate our involvement further or back away entirely? And if we escalate, are we comfortable with the slow creep that will place the lives of more war-weary members of our armed services at risk? We need to know the scale of our intervention, the limit of our commitment and the nature of our involvement before we can be asked to affirm it. Parliament cannot be expected to vote on pure sentiment. It needs to vote on specifics.
Could my honourable friend give way just on that point? He, like me, I think, is sickened by the number of times we've actually voted for war in this place, sometimes in retrospect to my great shame. But isn't it the fact, what is the hurry about this? This civil war's been going on for 2 years. Isn't it time that we got on with negotiation and diplomacy?
I know honourable members turn away because they think I might not stop them if their intervention is too long. But can I remind all honourable members that when they're speaking to the chamber, they address it through the chair, so that if I need to sit them down because they're going on too long, I can. Mr. David Lammy.
Well, I'm grateful to my honourable friend, and he's precisely right. The point has been made. There is nothing in this motion that could not have been debated next week, and we should be very concerned at the speed and the haste that is indicated beyond this place. Madam Deputy Speaker, we should remember that conflicts do not take place without context. This particular one will not take place without history. Neither will it take place without suspicion of our intentions or outright hostility to our presence. Syrian government assertions that French, British and American agents launched the chemical attacks to pave the way for intervention may attract ridicule in this chamber, but let us not be so naive as to think that there will not be many willing subscribers to this conspiracy theory across the Middle East. We must never underestimate the cynicism that surrounds our motives and those of our allies. We must never underestimate that even the most humanitarian of objectives can be misconstrued as a nefarious attempt by the West to project its power. We must never underestimate that we must first win the battle of perception before all else. Any intervention needs to be demonstrably unscrupulous. It needs to be a product of more than just the usual suspects, and it needs to be the last resort of a process that has visibly exhausted all diplomatic means. But the recent hatcheting up of rhetoric has come to the expense of reason and eschewed responsibility. The cacophony of tough words and the insidious indication that attacks can take place as early as this weekend has not facilitated diplomacy or the forging of alliances. We need cooler heads rather than broader shoulders. The government must abandon the march for war by the weekend. It must assure the House that any military intervention will only be countenanced after the weapons inspectors have been given time to investigate, free from external pressure. The process may be long and arduous, but it is necessary and right. We have this debate on the anniversary of that speech that Martin Luther King made. He made another speech in '67. It was a speech against the Vietnam War. We should read those words again as we contemplate this.
Order. Laura Lee Burt.